All right, so I am Dan Denny, and we are going to be talking about Webflow for web devs. I guess specifically for this talk for Tampa web devs. And on the screen up here, we have the homepage of Webflow, and their big tagline is that you can use the tool to build with the power of code without writing any. And while that is true, and we will be talking about how to do some of that, my main focus is going to be how to look at this tool from someone who does write code for a living. So if you are a non-developer or a new developer and you might not be familiar with like some of the things that I'm going to talk about from a coding perspective, I would suggest just diving into like an intro to Webflow video on YouTube. They'll give you more information of like how someone without any web experience could absolutely build a website and build and maintain and run a website with this tool. But given that, let's talk about the plans for the talk. I am going to go into my background a little bit. I do like to skip that very often, but I think for this particular thing, it is important so to understand like why I see this tool as valuable and the experience that I've had that kind of like leads me to that. We'll talk about what Webflow is specifically and some details on it. We'll talk about how devs could use it, how I've used it in some of my recent projects, and then the most fun part is we'll dive in and we'll use it together. So, 2008, I took my first job, or earned my first job in the web world. I was a web designer at a small agency in Redington Shores, Florida. And what we would do is we would talk to small businesses about what they did. They want a website, they would tell us what they did. We would go into Photoshop and then create an image of a website of what we thought it might look like once they gave us content and got approval. They would give some feedback. We would go through and we'd create all that in Photoshop. And then once we were ready to go and they had content to get into it, we would then go build the website again, now in like probably Dreamweaver at the time, and basically export whatever we could out of Photoshop, but really just create a website now from an image over there. 2010, I kind of started moving away from that a little bit, got my first taste into products. I was working for a media agency for a while. And then I actually worked on my first product here in Tampa at Spark Labs. It was a thing called Tourist. And so in this time, I started to work in a way that I was taking other people's work and then turning that into code. So like they would create images in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever, and then I would turn that into a website from there. 2012, I got hired into a company called Code School, and at this point, the industry had shifted a little bit, and then I had shifted. Throughout my years, I found I wasn't really a designer. I'm not. I don't have that like natural skill. I'm more better at taking something that exists and expanding on it. And so by 2012, I was just looking to just code other people's work. Anybody that was like a fantastic designer, I want to work with you and then like build that out. And I worked with some fantastic people at Code School. And then I've been doing that ever since. So I worked at online education companies since then, doing product work, implementing images of websites into code and putting them out on the web. Now, I did put 2021 here as the front end developer end. And that's just because since 2021, technically speaking, I'm a software engineer and it's pretty close to the same, but like I go way further into the stack than I used to. And so it's kind of like unrelated a little bit to this talk. So this is kind of all my experience that shaped my opinion about Webflow. Now, all throughout this time, the one thing that has maintained or been consistent is that I've always had side projects. So one thing is I've run a conference in St. Pete. I have a personal site. I have volunteered at a site that provides information for missing and murdered people. I have my own data projects, just little things that are all throughout this. And the one thing with that is once you're doing a side project again, you're now responsible again for the entire thing. Unless you have teammates or like a group that you're working with, I'm responsible for like the design and the development side all the way through. But in those side projects, very rarely these like throughout, once I shifted to a front end developer, very rarely will I sit down in a tool like Figma or Photoshop or Sketch or anything like that and design out a website. Most of the time, I will start in the browser and just kind of like start designing up from it. And that has pros and cons. It can be faster, but I feel like a lot of the times the creativity gets lost in there because there's a like a wildness and a funness that you can have if you're just developing it or designing in a tool instead of writing code to design something. And so that led me to looking around for like other options. And I came across Webflow. And as I was going to look and like define like how to define Webflow, I saw this ad and it's perfect. The ad happens to be for one of their competitors, but it absolutely described Webflow as well. So Framer put out this ad and it was like, if you've ever used Figma, you'll feel right at home with Framer because it's like Figma, but you get a real site. And that is exactly what Webflow is as well. And so Framer is a very cool product. It's actually what got me interested in this whole no code, low code thing again. I'll use those terms interchangeably because even though technically speaking, some of the tools are called no code, they really are low code because there is always code involved in some kind of way. So Framer is an excellent tool. It got me interested in this, but there's a couple of things about Webflow that are specifically made me do this. But the key thing being that what you're not doing with these tools is creating an image that then has to be coded. You are creating a website in the tool. And so Webflow specifically is a hybrid tool. Like I said, it is merging that world of like design and development all in one tool. It has a drag and drop interface that you can do this stuff with. It integrates with a lot of other tools. You can have authentication, e-commerce, like anything like that. And it even has its own built-in CMS. So this isn't like you're just creating one-off pages or landing pages or something like that. You can build like a functional website as well. It's also a very versatile tool for the whole workflow around creating a website. From the design side, you can design directly in Webflow. So you can just open it up and start making things and go right from there in the tool. Alternatively, you can work in a tool that you're familiar with, like Figma. And if you're familiar with Figma, you can then export that into Webflow. There is a little bit of a process. There's a plugin involved with it. And the reason why Webflow will work very well is why Figma will work very well is Figma does a couple things to try and simulate a browser experience a little bit. Their auto layout being one thing that kind of simulates a web environment. And so like there's a way to map that off into Webflow from Figma. If you're using something like Photoshop or Sketch, it's going to be a little bit more tricky because that has a different a curve to it. On the development side, you have options as well. So if you're a developer working this tool, you can publish directly onto their hosted option. So you can just push a button and you're all taken care of. You can integrate with other platforms, authentication, e-commerce, forms. There's this one really cool tool called Outseta. You have a full customer relationship manager thing, and it all hooks right into Webflow. It's fantastic. And then finally, and this was the key thing that sold me on Webflow versus Framer, is you can export the code and use it in your own projects. And that was something that was absolutely necessary for me as a developer because I need to be able to take this stuff and put it off into a different tooling setup. Another big thing about Webflow is I literally see it as my virtual replacement. So one of the reasons that I am gainfully employed is that I have a skill and I really enjoy taking a single design and figuring out how that will work across all of the various browser sizes. I have read these blog posts about designers where that like kind of like design for this whole entire flow. I very rarely have ever worked with them. Most of the time I get one size of a design, maybe a mobile and a desktop or something like that, and then I figure out how it's going to work all the way through there. And I do a lot of code for that, a lot of testing, dragging the browser around, doing all this stuff. Webflow has this built in, Figma and Webflow both have this built in, and it's done really, really well. So you can set up your own breakpoints, what levels that you want to check. It's a little bit more like an adaptive design in some ways. But you can kind of do it both ways. But basically, you're kind of like checking like how this is going to change across various browser sizes, and it works really, really well. Cool. So that's, kind of like an intro to it. So now let's talk about you and like how you could use it. One of the most instant ways is personal projects. So if you're watching this and you don't have a personal site right now, but you kind of wanted one, but you're like, I code all day. I don't want to go home and then code and work on my site. Or I want something kind of like flashy looking, but I'm not a designer. Like all those kind of like things. Webflow kind of has a way to just handle this. You can have a site up in a couple of minutes. Templates are very affordable. Some are free, but but very affordable, like in the tens of dollars. And then so you can do that, or it can be a blog. It could be like some site that you just want to make like a landing page for something, some fun little project. If you keep it around 1 to 2 pages, you could go their free option. If you go beyond that, you are going to have to pay their monthly fee for the hosting kind of thing. But the same thing like if you hit a certain level on various hosting things that you need to pay for as well. Another option is prototyping. I think a lot of us work in complicated stacks with it. Once you've been at a company for a while or a product has been around for a while, it gets a little bit trickier to add something new or to explore within your code base a little bit. And so this tool is actually fantastic for being like, I want to show what I'm thinking and have people like be able to touch it, use it, actually like have it function in a browser, but I don't want to spend a bunch of time like coding it out and making it work. This tool is like very fantastic for kind of getting things up and running very quickly. Another thing is if you are at a company that could embrace having one of these types of tools for their kind of like their customer facing UI, you could help transition designers of that company. You have the skills, you understand how the web works, you're going to understand how this tool is trying to like put a UI over like web functionality. And then you would be able to teach the designers like how this works, help them adopt it faster, and then offload that implementation of design to other people or to the designers themselves for like shipping them. Even technically non-designers, once you got like the thing in there, you could have, you're like, I work with a marketing team and they could be jumping in here and editing text and doing all those kinds of things. So that's one option. And then finally, another option is you could transition yourself. I think low code and no code is here to stay. And if you take both the tools themselves, combine them with some AI, and you start to see that, I think at least for implementing designs on the web, I think where you can see a future where we're not going to do that as often as we do now. So just another thing to explore in this kind of like exciting web world that we have. So that kind of like covers like some options. And so now I am a dev and I had a need for something recently. So I needed a landing page. I wanted to pitch an idea. I used to run a conference here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we wanted to bring it back, but we wanted to find out, do people want it? So we figured we'll put up a landing page, get email addresses, see if people are interested in having it come back. So I needed a landing page. I built that. I did my normal thing. I jumped into the code editor. I like put together some images and some text and a little like email form thing, and I shared it with my best friend and like my fellow conference founder, and she was like, it's boring. And I was like, you're right. And she was like, it needs to be fun for people to be excited and want to have the conference come back. And I was like, you're right again, but I don't have time. I was like, if we want to get this out, I have this weekend. I've got to try to I can't figure out how to build a whole a fun website beyond the thing that I just kind of shared with you. And so I was like, okay, let me take a look around and see what I can find. And I was like, I've been checking out Framer a bunch, and I was just like, I looked into that, but I couldn't export code. So I'm like, oh no. So I was like, can you do that in Webflow? Yes, you can. So I'm like, okay, let me look at some templates and see where we could get. And so I found this template called Pizza Guy. And Pizza Guy doesn't sound like a conference, but that's the fun of templates is I need to drag this just a little bit. So Pizza Guy doesn't kind of like match with a conference, but just like I was saying with templates, you can kind of like, you can figure out where you're going to go with a template or with any kind of like blank thing. So I saw this, I was like, this is really fun. It doesn't have a ton of text, which is exactly what I need for a landing page. It has some fun animations. I'm dragging this browser around because I don't want to cause problem for the template person, but like on my specific 2015 MacBook Pro and Chrome at 1400, I have like this this issue with the animations. So I'm just bringing it in a little bit for that. But I saw this thing. It was a lot of fun. I was like, I can see how this can work. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to learn. And so I grabbed that. And then jumped into Webflow itself. And so this was my first project where I was really working with Webflow. And so I did as much as I could in my comfort zone in the tool itself. So I edited a bunch of stuff, got to the edge, and then once I was like, I'm not so sure about how this part here is working or if I'm even going to keep this part, I then exported it off into code. And the wonderful thing about that is you get a little zip, and it's a bunch of assets, including an index.html file that when you double click it and open it up, the page just works. And that is, to me, the dream way of working with the web. I love it when things just work everywhere. Not a popular thing in today's modern front-end tooling framework world where you can do that kind of thing. So I was very excited about that. I happen to be using a tool called Eleventy to run the conference site, and that tool works very well with this type of thing. I can take HTML, CSS images, pop that into there, have no problem. I'm not trying to convert this into like a React project or anything like that. So real quick, I'll just open up like what the project itself looks like in there. One thing as this loads that is interesting, I haven't found a like a desktop version of Webflow, kind of like how Figma has like an Electron like wrapper around the thing. It just seems to be straight in the web, in the browser all the time. But so this is the interface around Webflow, and you can kind of see I took the pizza thing, I edited some of the images, changed out some of the text. I kind of left the pizza, I guess, there for some reason, but swapped out some of these images, started to do this part, but then I wasn't so sure about it, ended up scrapping it later. And then here, kind of like brought in like social things from people in the past. And so I had edited all this in here and then did an export and then put it out on the web. And so then I did the same thing again. So it worked really well. I got some great feedback. People were like, oh, the site is so fun, blah, 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 blah. I could have never designed anything like that. It took me a half a day. That is the one important thing I didn't mention on the last slide. I started around in the morning on a Saturday and was done before, in the middle afternoon before dinner on Saturday. And so that was fantastic. So I did it again when I now needed a real version of the conference site. This one has to have a bunch more information. I've got to have all the talks. I've got to have a bunch of other stuff on it. So I looked for another template. I did it again, rinse, repeat, same type of thing, except I behaved differently when I got into Webflow, and I want to share that because I made a mistake. And so as this opens up, you'll be able to see here, like it's a template. If you looked at the template, it's almost all exactly the same except for this text. And so I got in here and for whatever reason, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to like export this out since I've got to edit a bunch of content. I'm going to export it out and I'm going to do it in code. And that was a mistake. It took me way longer than it should have. I could have done it much faster by editing the things in here than exporting it out instead of like getting it all into code. I think I was thinking that because I'm a developer, it would be faster to do it that way, but it wasn't. So this one was a solid day. This was, I started Saturday again and sometime in the morning, and I ran all the way until, it was time to go to sleep. But I will share real quick kind of like what these two things ended up as. So that first page, this is kind of the version of it. So this was like the, hey, are you interested in it? Let's do it type of thing. And then I took that version that we were just looking at with the very dark background and stuff in it, and I turned it into this. So I brought the styles from the old one over into here, but I used that kind of animation that it had to show like kind of like attendees. It got to rate this and switched it out to the old other style, but I could just see these things in the template, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun. This was like a whole bunch of people, but instead I'm using like kind of like little bubbles to kind of like fill in the space around it. So I was able to tweak this. I didn't see the value of the animation in the thing before, but I thought a snapshot of the day might be really helpful. And so kind of went through here, add things of like the people who are attending, a big video, reduce the tickets, and then they show like the venue and that kind of stuff. So again, it did take me a day, and I am giving you like a warning about that, saying like use the tool as much as you can, because like it'll probably be faster. But I mean, at the same time, to me, for what I usually work in, that is a fantastic outcome for a day's worth of work. It was a long day, but it's a day's worth of work, and it was fantastic. And now I'm same type of thing. I have edited that out into code, or exported that out into code. It is in 11D. I make updates to it pretty regularly, but they're all going through code. And like at this point, I don't need Webflow anymore. I am operating this as a regular website. Cool. So now I think it would be really cool if we built some stuff. So even though right now I'm recording this as a video, the intention is like I'm practicing for doing it live, but also I wanted to share it out on the web. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this the same way that I would as I'm talking live. I'm going to show videos of me doing the videos, and I'm going to talk over them. I'm not going to try and recreate the thing in here. So we're going to step through some stuff. I'm going to build a couple things in Webflow, not because I expect devs to be really creating designs as much, but more because I can show you how the tool works, why I appreciate it, and use some things in order to go through that. So one of the first things that we're going to focus on, it's super important, it's what differentiates Webflow from Figma, Photoshop, all those kinds of things, is that it is using the box model. So for anybody that isn't familiar with the box model, it's basically like how browsers display things in the web. So the difference in Webflow is you are not creating images, you are creating web elements, and it has this UI, and that UI is adding web elements in the same way that as devs we would code an element. The difference is you're just pushing some buttons in order to do it instead. But just as a refresher for the box model, browser looks at everything as boxes. You and I would look at this text of like strength in a purpose, have that like that it kind of looks like a pyramid. It has a unique shape. Everything is different. Maybe the button is round. The browser is like, nah, that's a box. And we put boxes in your boxes. And so the article is a box. And then the H1 is a box, and the strong element that is within the H1 has a box, and each of those boxes have display properties on them. And depending on the type of display property that they are, you can then add features to them or attributes in the CSS for them. A strong element is an inline element, so you can see it's actually smaller than the H1 because it's in line within the H1. The H1 is a block level element, so you can add margin to it. And so it has margin that it goes above on the top and the bottom of it. That margin actually takes up space in its parent element. And so all of this is like relationship things that are very, very important to how to display things on the web. And if a tool doesn't use these, it's an image creator. And so the Webflow is different in that it is using a UI to function like this. So we're going to dive into a video demo right now. And so I'm going to compare creating something in Figma and then in Webflow. So I'm going to open this up, click on here, and we are opening up Figma. Luckily on this screen, you might be able to see things. I think maybe when I'm presenting, it might be a little different, but there's not much detail. I'm not zooming right here because in Figma, I'm just creating like a frame for a MacBook Pro. I'm bringing in the Kforce logo, who is hosting the actual meetup that we're talking through. I'm going to drag that over here, make it 300 pixels, put it in the middle. I don't pay for Figma, so I don't have the dev mode bar that they've changed to now. But if you go over here and go to edit and copy, you can get the CSS that it would give you. Paste that CSS into a tool, and you can see it's trying to do position absolute with the width and the height, and then like an absolute pixel value from the left and the top, and then a background image for the URL. Absolutely just not how we would code this. If you're trying to make an image at the top of a web page, you're not going to do that. So let's compare that to how Figma or how Webflow is going to look at it. Again, if you're not zoomed in, even on the video, you're not missing any details here. I'm just giving the little project a site name. This one is particularly thank you to Kforce for hosting us. At this moment, I'm in my own home, but other than that, it will be live when I do this. So here, there's a little layout option that pops up. We'll look into that in a bit. But for the moment, I'm going to do that same thing, and I'm going to grab that logo, and I'm going to drag it into here. I'm going to change it off to 300 pixels like I did before. A little slower. There's some other options in here. You can do some various stuff. I don't need to do that. But now I'm going to drag it to the middle like I did before, but I can't. And that's because, no, this is a web thing. You need to put a div and put that thing in a div. And that div is a container because a container will have a max width. And that's kind of built in. Now I'm going to make that container display flex. And that now that it's a display flex element, I'm going to justify content center. And by using justify content center, I now have a flex parent with a child that is centered, and that's all in an HTML, all in markup essentially. And so that is the difference between Figma and Webflow. We just built a web entity, a web page essentially, whereas in the other one, you're kind of building an image. Cool. So now let's jump back over into here. I don't see any reason to make a big screen because we're just going to do another video. So I'm going to do that same thing, but I'm going to kind of create this UI, right? So I was looking at the Kforce website. They have this cool header area with some text over an image and a button and stuff like that. If you are watching this video, I will have the slides and stuff shared, but you can break off these individual videos if for some reason you wanted to do that. But for people that are watching it live, I'll share that as well. So if we look at this thank you, we're going to jump right back into that area that we were. And so now I'm showing this navigator over here because I was talking about at the end that we're kind of making an HTML structure. And this is kind of looking at the dev tools a little bit. So we have our body element, and then we've got a container element and an image in it. Now we're going to add a section, and that's a real section. You can change the element to be the section element. And so then when I put it in, I'm oh, it's touching the logo. So I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to put a little padding on that container so that no matter what, there's always some space around that logo up there. Kind of how we would do, very much like what we would do for the web. Now I'm going to add an H1 into my section. And so you don't think about it as oh, I'm adding a text block. You're oh, I'm going to add an H1 here. And I'm going to put thank you for hosting us. And then in here, I'm going to click around on the section and the heading for a moment. I don't remember exactly what I was doing right there. But anyway, now I'm going to go to this section, and I'm going to put a background image on it, kind of like what they had in the example before. You can barely see it coming in a little bit right up there, but that's just because the section is actually very small. So, but in that, I'm going to say make that background image background size cover. So it'll kind of adjust with the size of the container itself. And then here, I'm actually looking to increase the size of the container, but I'm going to do it on the H1. But you can see I got a little bit lost in the UI. So I'm scrolling around looking for the size thing. So what I'm looking for is the H1 size, which is right there. And so I want to set a min height of that. And I want to use viewport units. So I'm going to say 40 viewport height units. So it's at least kind of 40%, but using the actual browser viewport height. So I'm going to say like put that back there. I'm going to go back off into their website, grab a blue and bring it back over. So I'm going to pick that, bring it in here, and I'm going to paste that into the background color of our H1, which is over the section. And then you see I get a little confused right here. And that's because I remembered that there was a little like opacity selector, but you have to click the little color thing. And so what I want here is I want that blue, but I want it at 80% opacity. So it'll shine through and let that background image like show behind it. Now we can't read the text, so it's time to change that. One bad thing about using the browser is like on my mouse when I'm moving around, I will catch that swipe thing where it tries to like leave the page. But anyway, I'm gonna add Open Sans here, switch it off to white, and then I'm going to use web properties here to basically arrange this thing. So this is an H1, and I'm gonna make the H1 a display flex element, and I'm going to vertically and horizontally center that with a line item center and justify content center. This is one of my favorite parts. You just wrap something with a span. Like it tells you you're wrapping it with a span. This is web stuff that you're using a UI for. This is how I would code this also. So I want that, break that down to another line, but I want a screen reader or a crawler to read that as a single H1 with a span element that's breaking it up. Here, I'm not doing anything too crazy, but I am applying web properties. So here, that double A, that is, transform, text transform uppercase. So that's going to put text transform uppercase there. I'm now changing the size of this thing. I'm going to make it really big, make it like a fun little message. And then I'm going to change the text that's in the span differently. And this is how I would code this as well. It would be like an H1 with a span, and I would change that. I would make it display block, or like I did a flex item as well. Cool. And so now you see me here, I'm fighting line height a little bit because I was expecting it to be like 1.05 or 105%. But I think the font Open Sans has like a taller line height than I was expecting, so I had to put it at 0.8. But anyway, so now we have built this little thing, and now we want to look at it for like the various sizes. So what does this look like at a little bit smaller desktop? What does it look like tablet size? And then mobile. Mobile's like, woo, this is terrible. So let's change that. And like I said, this is what I do for a living. And so I was just like, okay, cool. Boom. Change this to 48. I'm going to bring this. I forgot the ratio and I went to half, but it should be about 32. And so here, now that looks good. And so now we have like on your phone, it'd be like 40% of the phone. It has this thing. It works across all the sizes. And you've got this nice little happy design. It's not the most amazing thing in the world from me just implementing this really quick, but I'm not a designer. I use templates for my designs. But anyway, we bring this off into the web, and this is the real thing. I just did that little publish, which is a build step, and now we're in the web. And we look at this, you can't see the header, it's up there, but it's just a header element and an image tag, and then a section with an H1 and some text and a span in it with some CSS classes on them. This is how I would code this. You could argue, little things about naming and that kind of stuff, but that is how you would code it, and it works across the web. Now, it broke right down there, but that was at like 200 and some pixels. It's like I usually start from like a 320 and up type of thing. So that was like a UI on top of the web, and that to me is really exciting because I have checked out so many of these like Photoshop to HTML things or even Figma to HTML things, and they're mostly terrible. And so I am very, very excited at how well done this one is. So again, I'm not going to bring up size because guess what we're going to do? We're going to look at another video. All right, so one more video. We're going to dive through this thing. And this to me is important to just show that this is not just a landing page tool. Like, it is a landing page tool. You can build them with it, but it's so much more than that. And so I'm going to dive in and kind of like show off some of the functionality here really quick. And we're going to look at some fancy things. So here, I'm going to open this up, another new site, go off into here. You're going to have seen me do this about 11 times so far. But we'll make a little landing page, like buy my thing, super popular type of thing. You jump on a landing page, you get some information. They have a bunch of prefab things in here in this add a layout section, right? So boom, got navigation. Just throw that up there. Switch out your logo, change your text, update your links, and it's yours. I'm going to go back into this layout section, and then, we'll grab the stereotypical hero section. I get an error right there because I can't nest a component in a component. And that was just like, you look at your navigator, I want navbar and then header. I was trying to put navbar or header in navbar. But here, it wouldn't be a website without logos, right? So you got to throw the logos little section down in there. Then we'll go, of course, you can't not have a slider. So here we're going to have a slideshow gallery. You pop that down in there. You've got this little thing. This would be that kind of thing I was talking about earlier where you would prototype something very quickly, be able to show it off and talk through something. Not just you, but people in your company, marketing people could be able to do this kind of thing. We throw a pricing thing in here. We now see our kind of page structure. This feels good. We can sell a product from this right here. Let's slap a footer down there. Got to have the one with the little email subscribe. Boom, click on this. It works right into, stacking up. These are all pre-designed things, so they're already tested. They're going to work well. You might change the size of that title right there, depending on what your final copy was. But run our build step. We're off in the web. We are speaking Latin, but this is all real code and real things. It's interactive. The drop downs work. The buttons have hover elements or hover styles to them. They're a little, light, but then the sliders work. This is a functional web page that I just created in 2 minutes and 10 seconds or something like that, which to me is fantastic. So now we're going to look at another thing. I mentioned earlier on that they do have a CMS. And so we're going to look at that real quick. I'm not going to worry about styling for this. I just want to show off the functionality to show that this isn't just make a fun landing page or make a quick prototype of a thing. You could build a real a real content site around this. So I always want to click that little cube for it, but that's the components cube. This is the collections area. Again, you're not missing any details in here. I'm just calling something blog post, but there is a ton of options that you can do for stuff like this. So I'm going to create that. This is a awesome feature. It lets you just populate a bunch of stuff. So I chose 10. It was 5, 10, or 20 where you can just populate some content and kind of get started and be like, oh, let me show this off. For this demo, it was great. So now we're going to look at this area here, and this is the blog template. So this is your blog page, the actual physical blog page. And so I'm going to put my container in there. So I've got my section with a container. I'm going to put an H1, but I'm going to populate that from the data. And so if H1, get it from the blog post data, the blog post title is 10 great examples of responsive websites. So now I'm going to head back off to my home page. I'm going to put a container element in there in the body. I'm going to go to the section in the layouts, and then this is their collection list section. So I'm going to double click that. I'm going to hook it up to blog posts. So I'm going to connect this thing to the data. And now you can kind of see all the titles that run down that thing right there. Probably just covered up my whole face with my hand right there. Awesome. Make these H2s because, you're going to have a series of them down in a line. And then hook them up to the names of the blog posts. And boom, you've got all the data off in a row right here. This would be the same thing as, pulling in and doing a map over your data, depending on the tool that you're working on. Here I'm adding a paragraph. When I did this as a different practice round, there was a summary that I'm looking for right here, but instead I'm just going to put the created on. It all happens to be the same date, but that's because it is really the same date in the data. When you do push that button, it creates it all at the same time. And then finally, I'm going to add a link because the key thing of this would be this would be your list of blog posts and you want to link them off to the individual blog post page. And so here, you have to click in this little collections thing, and then you're going to say, make that text link to the current blog post. pretty straightforward type of thing, right? But I was looking for how do I change the text link? Like, is it part of required? Because it wants to offer to take it from the blog post, but I don't want to do that. So once I can type, I want to be able to say that like read now. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to, you can't see it exactly, but I'm pushing the like publish thing again. So our little build step, HTML, CSS, shoot it out to the CDN. I think this is actually super, super fast. I'm going to click that link and nothing happens. How awesome is that? So that's because, I don't know if you saw it, but when I was backing up, I accidentally like deleted all the text, which really deleted the link. So I have to go back through and just hook that back up. I left it in because there's an error I made, but it might be a gotcha you would run into. The key thing was like I had to have at least a letter left of that thing before I actually deleted the link. But it's just a small little like gotcha that I left in there. But now I refresh this, and now we click over and we get blog posts as a slug, section, and then the slug of the or as like a category, and then like the slug being the name of the title all created for you. And to me, like, this is just so cool. Like, if you really wanted to be able to create your own little like blog and not have to like go home and code and be able to have something fun and learn something new, this is a super fantastic option for that. So we did a lot of stuff. Well, I did a lot of stuff, and then I showed it to you on video. But now is the part where if I was standing in a room full of people, I would ask someone for a volunteer at this point. But what we're going to do is we're going to create something live. I have actually recorded a version of this just in case everything goes nuts with the Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. But for this part, while I'm recording it, we might as well just make it again, right? So we're going to create something. And I'm going to throw an additional tool at you. So you get a bonus tool that isn't Webflow, but is very Webflow related. And so I want to show how to solve a problem. There's this tool called Reloom that I believe is solving a real problem in the world. They're using AI, and AI gets this like flash in the pan type of like reaction for a lot of things. And I even roll my eyes at a bunch of it because like, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I see for all these tools is like create a landing page in 60 seconds. Well, in the real world, outside of demoing something really for a talk, I don't have that problem. Like, I don't need a landing page in 60 seconds. That's not a problem that I face regularly in life. What problem I do have that I face all the time is people who are non-technical that have an idea and they want it on the web, and they want to be able to guide me how to do that. So whether or not they have a designer, they have an idea. They want like, they're gonna like, we're gonna promote an event at work, or something I have done very recently. We're gonna promote an event at work. The person doing that event knows that they want to show like this information up in the top. They want to show speakers. They want to show like the schedule of the day. They want to do all that kind of stuff. And they have all that in mind, but they don't have a great way to communicate it. And so then the flow becomes they put stuff in a doc, and then the designer goes and creates like a shell. And then there's somewhere between the doc and the shell, like you'll start to get those two things communicating. And then I will come along and I will get some of the stuff from the shell in Figma and some of the stuff from the doc, and then I'll put it all into code, and we'll go through this whole process, right? And that is less than ideal. And so that is a real problem that I run into constantly, almost every day. And so I was just like, this tool right here, Reloom, is actually solving that. So let's look at that. So Reloom, we're not going to the marketing components section, but Reloom is a tool. That's taking a second. But Reloom it was a UI library for Figma and Webflow, but with the kind of like AI add-on, it added this whole other level of site mapping and wireframing, and we're gonna step through that. So in the real talk, I'm gonna ask someone in the crowd for a suggestion of what we should make right now. But since it's me, I'm going to use something that I understand very well, because when I want to test these tools out, I don't want to do something magical that I have no idea about. I want to test it by using something that I understand very well and then see how the tool executes on that thing. So we're going to create a new project. And so here it's like, oh, okay, you're about to create a new project, right? And so this is the kind of thing I was talking about. Like someone has an idea, they want to get it out of their head. This tool will help them, but it'll also help you if somebody else uses this tool, because it's going to put the onus on them to get a lot of the work done up front, to think through things that are necessary all the way through. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to describe the company that I work for. I work for a company called Data Camp, and we teach data science online. And so I'm going to describe the company in a sentence or two to generate a sitemap. So I'm going to be an online education company that teaches data science. Not to give you too much of our secrets and magic away, but we'll say like the number of pages of that is like 5 to 10. Sure. Let's generate a sitemap. And so now this is kind of going through and it's processing the words that I gave it. And it's kind of like outlining the things that it feels like you would need on a homepage for that project. And then also, as you can see, other things that it would suggest that you would probably have. You're going to want an about page to kind of describe what the company is. You're going to want a courses page that then has a course detail page. You're going to want to have a blog and blog posts, and then you're going to want to have a way to contact you. This all makes a ton of sense. Like this was probably the like almost the exact structure, not the blog, but the exact structure of Data Camp when it first started. But the cool thing is now in here you can kind of dive into these things and you can create content with them, you can edit them. So here, like I think on the homepage we don't necessarily need the contact section, like as long as we have that. What is it? How do I delete it? Oh yeah, it's delete, sorry. So here, so like now our homepage is gonna have a nav bar, a hero header, some other stuff. We can even look at this and see like maybe some of this isn't even necessary, right? And so now I'm gonna go here and we have the home. You can regenerate the page if you want. I'm gonna go down here, I'm gonna generate the about page and we'll step through that. There was a button that I think I clicked and lost. But there's like one of this that would have let me click it and it would do all the pages in one shot. So hopefully tomorrow when I do this, I click that the right way. But here you see about us. Probably went a little too nuts with some of the stuff here, but you could go through and like change that. But the courses with a header and a courses list, features list, benefits, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, you could say like, okay, here, we have the courses list, features list, how it works, team section, we probably don't need. But let's say like we want pricing before testimonials, we want that, right? And so here we've got that. And then the course detail page, we can manually add sections if we want, but we can also just let AI kind of like generate out this tool, generate out the flow for us. It's going to go through course item, header, body, features list, benefits, how it works, testimonials, pricing. I think it's a little redundant to have pricing, especially for my company, because we're like a subscription service, so you can't buy an individual course. So we'll delete that out. And you just kind of go through this whole flow, right? And then we click on this wireframe option, and what it was doing in the background while we're doing that is it was generating out a UI for all of the stuff that we would then want, right? So here we have, okay, here's our new homepage. And so it's a logo with a nav, we have that, you got a big header section, a list of like your courses that you have available, the entire catalog, some like social proof, and this looks, like a real product. You slap some colors and some, some unique branding stuff on this, and you've got a website. Your About Us kind of has like information on it, where you're at. Courses is like a collection of your courses, and then all your information, and then like your course page. So why am I showing you this stuff when we're talking about Webflow? Because If you want to make change to this, you make changes to this, right? Like I could ask the AI to like make this a little bit shorter. Sure, we'll replace that. You can also just like jump in and change it to whatever you want. Like one of the things that we're very focused on right now is AI. So I might say discover your potential with data science and AI courses, right? So now, but back to why I was showing you this when we're talking about Webflow is right here. Oops, that's a fun little gotcha. But right here, I have the option to copy this to Figma or to Webflow. So I'm going to clone the style guide because it says like, hey, like you're about to do this, like make sure that you have the style guide, because the one thing that I didn't talk about a little bit in the stuff in the past is that I was doing everything very manually and like typing in the exact font size and the colors and all that kind of stuff. But this tool is built for people that are using design systems and custom branding and systems as a whole. So you don't have to be manually editing all that stuff. You turn things into like reusable styles and apply them throughout the thing. Reloom has done that for their tool here, and so they want to make sure that you're using the style guide. So I'm going to copy their project there. I'm going to say I got it, and then I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to copy this to Webflow, right? Got it. Boom. I'm going to go in here, and then I am going to paste. And I think I did my thing where I'm not in the body again. So right there. Boom. Oh, man, this worked a lot easier before. Got it. Oh, cool. It was actually doing it. I was just impatient. So here we do that. We'll get rid of the navigator. And so now we can see our whole page in here. And so now we have this. This is our like home page that we got from this whole tool. We have all this stuff in here. Now I would go to my page level thing right here, and I'll add a page, and we'll just like add the courses page right here. And so now we have the courses page. I'm gonna go back over here, grab courses, copy that to Webflow. I'm gonna click that little thing to like not show me this every time. That would be awesome. And then I'm gonna come in here and I'm going to paste, and I'm gonna be patient for a second. And now I get our courses section, right? And so then, I can go back into my page, my home page, go up to here, and then edit the link for that, which will be /courses. And then I'll do one more thing. So let's go back here, add one more page, and we'll call it, let's see what it is. What's their introduction to data science? So we'll do introduction to data science. Technically, like in a development world, you would be doing something more like a slug page or something like that. I haven't dove in to do that, but given the fact that you can do it with the CMS, there has to be a way to do that. You can pull in real data from an API. You're going to be using like regular JavaScript for it. This is not like a like a React world type of thing. But again, I'm going to copy this thing over here. I'm going to paste that. Oh man, come on. I got to get into that habit of like going into the navigator to paste, but anyway, so now this is like the introduction to data science page. So now I'm going to go to my courses page, and this is all, a little like demo-y at the moment, but if I switch this right here, I'm surprised that's not naturally a link. That's a text block, but I want it to be a link. So how do I do that? I don't want to make that. I just want to convert this over to a link. I think what I'll do is instead, I can just do this, right? So I can just do a link. Cannot be nested inside of each other, so it is a link. Right there. Okay. All right, my bad. So the thing was courses or introduction to data science. I probably would have to put that into a folder to have like a proper structure for this, but introduction to data science is like the name where I put that page right at the moment, so we'll be able to see that. Cool. So now I am going to publish this, and like before, this is a little build step. HTML, CSS, shipping it off to a CDN, pop that open in the browser. It opened us up on the courses because that's where I was, but let's go to the home page. We've got all this, got a full like page. If I click courses, I'm going to go to the courses page, and then when I click my little link right here, I'm going to go off into my introduction to data science page. Obviously it could be done, much more cleanly, but I think it's pretty amazing to show that you went from an idea of like a structure, had all this content like available, and you can edit all of this. You turn that right into wireframes that are editable. You can change all of this. The like marketing side could go through and have this whole thing like edited with the exact copy that you want. Then you could bring it off into Webflow, and then your designer could then go like style it from there. Everyone could be doing their part in the same environment. And then as a developer, I think we would just come in at the end and just push the publish button, right? And then that's it. Our jobs are done. But no, I'm joking on that part. But I do think that this is absolutely fantastic. This is how I would like to work. And so I'm super excited about it. So that brings us to the end. We have talked about Webflow. We know what Webflow is, I hope, by now. We have talked about how you can use it, how developers can use it, how it can bring entire teams together and allow people to work all together in the same tool, getting their jobs done. There's probably some nuance to like working in the same tool, all because of like time, multiple people editing a file at the same time, that kind of stuff. But I hope that this was beneficial. I hope you learned something. I hope you're as excited or interested in it as I am. And I just want to say thank you for hanging out with me.